Please note that this episode has a trigger warning as we do talk about suicide.
Mike Dolbear, you are on Drummer Mamas and you are the Papa Bear.
I feel like I'm in Peppa Pig now.
Yeah, we thought we'd ask you on because you are a fantastic drummer and educator and you're doing all of the things. And if I'm correct, you have 3 daughters.
Two daughters and 2 grandchildren as well.
2 daughters, 2 grandchildren.
Well, I'm editing that out. But I wanted to ask.
Well, I hope I've only got 2.
Is your wedding
What a way to
anniversary
find
today?
out, isn't
This is the moment.
Oh my goodness.
We're about to bring her on. No, I'm joking.
But I want to start with drums. What age were you when you started learning? And when did you decide that you wanted to be a drummer as a career?
Okay, so I think I would have been about 10 or 11. I think the constant tapping, like everyone else, on the table, my dad had just had enough of it and went, right, you know what, let's get you having some lessons. And so off I went. My first drum teacher was a drum teacher in Brighton called Phil Solomon. What age did I decide that I wanted to do this? I think I've often talked about this, and I think it's an important thing to say. I think someone in your life probably changes the direction that you're going to take other than your family. And for me, it was a music teacher called Andy Oster. So I was about 12 or 13 years old and quite disruptive. I've openly discussed this recently because I've come to terms with I was dyslexic at school, but that wasn't a thing. You know, we were just stupid and thick and disruptive. That was how we were classed. And I was disruptive and thick. But drumming, I found something in drumming. My original music teacher had made it quite clear to me that drums wasn't an instrument. You don't the drums isn't a real instrument. You don't, that's piano, violin, and everything else was. And then this 6'4" young rugby teacher burst onto our music school, our school, and ended up at the music department. And just changed not only mine, but a lot of people's lives. First of all, just because of the presence of Andy, he demanded respect. Second of all, it was like he set up rock groups, pop groups, choirs, whatever he did. And that was it. I found probably my home. And so to answer your question there, that would have been the reason at probably that age, 13 years old, 14 years old, that was it. This was what I was going to do. I felt that I wasn't, I didn't really look for anything else, I suppose, but I wasn't very good at anything else. I could have gone into my family business, but music just took me. And I was fortunate because from the age of about 14, whether it was at the school or whether it was from outside the school, I was gigging at least twice a week. My dad would take me to these terrible, horrible working men's clubs, sit outside in the car because it was too loud and smoky, and I'd be playing with guys a lot older than me. And so I think that was it. I just knew that was what I wanted to do. So yeah, I think that's answered those questions.
Yeah. So how does that then relate to when you were a lot older and you decided you wanted to start a family? Did your image of how a career would be in drums change at all?
I think that my image of a career in drumming constantly changed. I thought that I'd leave school. I think this bit's quite important, although I'm going off track a little bit. I wanted to go to music college. My parents wanted me to go to music college. I wanted to go to Leeds Music College. But you couldn't get into Leeds Music College without an English A level and a music A level. And I think I needed another one. Anyway, English was the one that was holding me back. So I accepted that I would stay on sixth form. Goodness knows why, but I thought, right, okay, I've got to get an English A level. So I tried to stay on and I got through the first year and I would still be at school now and I would have never got an English A level. So straight away, coming back to your question, there was my first obstacle, if you like, in the way, because I thought, wow, I can't go to music college. I don't actually know what the next avenue is. I was still playing. I was doing all the shows that were coming into Brighton. I was 16, 17 years old. I was now studying with the great drummer Kenny Clare. So this was it. I knew what I wanted to do. But bang, it was like, well, what happens then? I don't know the scenarios. And my parents didn't, because they were builders, or my dad was a builder. And although we asked as many questions, there was the first obstacle. So I think it's constantly changed. I've always, I was fortunate enough that I did get around that. I did work, blah, 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 blah. I met my wife, and as you rightly say, today is our 30th wedding anniversary. She's so lucky. No, seriously. And I think that I always wanted children anyway. And I also had got to that stage in my career where, so I was in my 30s when our first was born, and I got to the stage where I wanted to not be away on the road constantly. And I've discussed this before. Touring back in those days was not even as easy as it is today, and there was no FaceTime. You go on tour, and you know, if you're in New York, for example, you might not even be able to afford to find a phone box to make a phone call home. So I'd sort of made that decision that when we had children, I wanted to be around. I couldn't work out how that would work. And I also think that I'd had enough of that kind of touring anyway, so it wasn't a big hurdle. But again, I've adapted. I mean, all my career, I've had to adapt. I think anyone that comes into the music career, if you think about what's happened in the music industry or the music that's been around over the last 40 years, you know, whether it's genres of music, whatever's happened, the click tracks come in, you know, that never existed when I first started. Then you can't start out going, this is what I'm going to do, and this is the track I'm going to follow. It's not going to happen. You have to adapt. You have to change. So I think I've constantly changed. And I managed to work and fit the family around that. Of course, like everyone, you know, you miss birthday parties, you miss christenings, you miss one. One of the good friend of mine, drummer's wife, used to have a badge made, and it had on the badge, it said, "I'm not single, I'm married to a drummer." So every time they went to these various weddings, christenings, you know, they were like, "No, I'm just." But you know what? That's a lot of professions. It's not just the drumming industry or the music industry. There's a lot of professions that are exactly the same. So it's not just isolated into our profession.
Is parenthood something that your students talk to you about in lessons?
Well, first of all, Gemma, for those that don't know, Gemma used to have lessons with me. I don't know if you ever discussed parenthood with me, but obviously, again, I've openly discussed this as a drum teacher, especially now. The teaching the drums is just part of the journey. You know, you have to be a psychiatrist, you have to be the doctor, you know. And I always say what goes on in the 4 rooms of a studio having a drum lesson stays in those 4 rooms. So the answer to your question is yes, male and female. Complications, difficulties, I think certainly in the UK, the last 5 years has changed people's attitude since COVID came along. Unfortunately, I've lost at least 2 people I can think of that took their own lives during when we come out of COVID, who are professional musicians, working musicians, and they had families, and they just couldn't see the way through the other side. So I think people's attitudes has probably changed. I mean, I have to say that I do think it's easier to be a parent on the road now, because first of all, you can travel with children better than you ever used to be able to. So if it comes to it, you can go to these places. Second of all, like I said, FaceTime, you know, that's an amazing invention. Or this, you know, you can see those situations where back in the day that just didn't exist. But yes, that conversation comes up as much as parenthood or relationships. I think it's how to survive for long term. You know, should I take this gig because I'm going to be away from this situation or that situation? So yeah, that's a big part of what we do as drum teachers.
you did actually have that conversation with me,
There you are.
and you gave me the best advice.
Oh
I
no.
remember coming to you one time and saying, I feel like I definitely want to have a family, and I don't know how that's going to work out with what I'm doing drumming wise, and what can I do about it? And you said, if you feel like you have to choose one or the other, like drumming or having children, think about when you're an old lady and you look back on your life, what would you regret not having? And I said, oh, yeah, I would definitely look back and wish that then I'd had children. So, and that's
Wow.
kind of, that's the route it took. So thanks. That was good advice.
That's good. I didn't. I'm going to remember that one for the next one. Look, with this, and I do listen to your podcasts, and I think it's great what you do. Um, but like I said, I think that we sometimes think that the drum or the music industry is isolated. My oldest daughter is a qualified nurse. When she had Harley, who's now 2.5, she came out of her maternity. She had to go back to work. There were 13-hour shifts, and you either do 7 in the morning till 7, 8 o'clock at night, or you do 7 at night until the following morning. So and there's more females in the nursing industry. That it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, how can you? Because as Holly would say at the time, or any nurse will tell you, you're either going to miss them all day, or when you come home from work, when you're going to sleep, if you've got to go back, and it's quite. I'm just using nursing as a job, but and she's actually come out of that job now, something she trained for, and she's gone back into waitressing because it fits what she wants to do, time with her son. So we look at it, and this is a drumming podcast, but there is lots of jobs that you go, actually, that doesn't work. This is what you want to do as a job, career, whatever you are, male, female, whatever. This is the career you want to do, but other things come in the way. You've got to make that decision how important each one is. And by the way, I have to just say, if you'd have chose the other way round, that's also fine. Some people will say, I don't want kids, I don't really want that, and that's cool. I also believe you've got to make your decision, you've got to stick to your decision, and never have any regrets with that, whatever that might be.
Yeah, absolutely. I know several women musicians who've decided they don't want children, and that's for them just, obviously that's fine, that's their choice. I'm glad you mentioned about your daughters, because we're going to come back to that topic a bit later, but I'm going to hand over to Kira now for another couple of questions.
I feel like we were headed in that way when you were talking about COVID just now, and how you lost some friends. Because what I really like about you is you are always posting many things, but you're always very vocal about mental health.
Yeah.
Has that always been something you've been very vocal about, or did that kick off in COVID? Can you tell us a little bit more?
No, it hasn't. Anyone that knows me, I do talk about this quite openly. I think that I lost a member of our family many years ago when I was a kid. He was gay, but unfortunately his father didn't accept that. And at the burial of his mother, he took his life that afternoon. So I think that maybe as a young lad stuck in my head, wow, that's surreal. That's a strange situation. So I guess something was there. We've talked about that as a family. That was more of a sexuality, coming to terms with being gay. And again, we're talking about now in the 70s. And so growing up, I think that conversation is probably something that's happened in our family, that maybe is just stuck with me. Being the father of girls, I think that in a way, girls, sadly, no, not sadly, that's the wrong word, but girls have to go when they get to a certain age, they go to the doctors, women go to the doctors, and they have to be tested for the most horrible situations. Guys don't do that. So I think that women, maybe when they want to talk about stuff, nothing's as bad as them having to have, breast scans or whatever, where guys, when they want to talk about something, they're like, oh no, they've never been put through that situation. So I think it's a big issue that young guys do not talk. We know it's fact that in the UK, 40 and under, suicide is the biggest killer in men. That is unbelievable. So I did lose a good friend I saw that particular person a couple of days before he took his life. I was angry with him for doing that, leaving a young family behind. I was angry with myself because I was like, why didn't I see the symptoms of this? Um, and from that moment, I think I was probably more, I had the access, if you like, to talk to younger guys and be able to say to younger, of course it's the same for girls as well, but I can only relate to guys here. I had the access to talk to younger men and sort of be able to say to them, right, look, you know what, you should talk to people. If there really is an issue, I don't like the other side as well, to be honest. I don't like people that use it as an excuse, because there is people that are really struggling, especially in our industry. And again, I'm sure there's going to be stuff that we're going to talk about in this, but our industry, we're in an industry where we're always going to get rejected. Always. We're never going to think we're good enough. Whether it's what we look like, whether we're playing, that's our industry. Okay. And there's nothing that we can change that. So then we're saying, okay, well, we're in this industry where we're always going to get rejected. We've got to come to terms with rejection, but also there's a high number of mental health in our industry. Those two aren't working alongside each other. So my advice always is to men, women, whatever, but women, I think you've got a network. I think you can talk to each other. With men is to talk. I just finished this with a quick story. When my youngest daughter was born 24 years ago, she was born very premature. She was 3 months early. And it was very traumatic for all of us. And she was in hospital for a couple of months. And it was brilliant for my wife because every day they would go in and they'd sit round and they'd all talk while my daughter was in hospital in the intensive care. They would sit and they would talk and they'd come out and they'd have a good cry and they all felt great. And the nurse said to me one day, because I was up there being a musician, obviously I had different times I could kill. I'd be up during the day and I would always take Holly, who was 2 at the time, with me. And the nurse said to me, if we set one of these up for the lads, would you sit around and talk to them? And I was like, listen, I'm happy to sit around and talk, but they're only going to want to talk about football and macho stuff not because they don't feel that stuff, but they don't open up like that. And that's quite sad. I think it's getting better. I think they're getting educated in schools. I think they're learning stuff like this. Not a sign of weakness to go and talk to someone, or if you've got a mate that you just want to share with. But like I said, going back, that statistic is pretty horrifying to think that you're that low that you think the only thing that's going to help everyone else is to take your own life. So yeah, I mean the incident with the musicians was guys that just come out of that industry. They were again both guys that just thought, how am I going to work again? How am I going to do this again? So yeah, I think I do discuss it a lot, but I think it's because I feel like I've got a platform that hopefully if I can get one message over to one young drummer that's 16, 17, 18, that they can carry that and, try, I think it's called pyramid sales, spread that to someone else and et cetera, et cetera. I think it's so important. Well, let me ask you the question to both of you. Okay, you both teach male and female. Do you find that your female students talk to you more than the guys, or is it pretty?
I say it's equal. Like many guys come in and then we'll have a joke because they'll always say, "Oh, I should pay you for therapy," because you ask the question, "How are you? What's going on?" And then they feel comfortable to talk about it. So thankfully, but I wouldn't say the same for the younger boys though. Actually, they stay quiet and they're like, that's it.
Yeah, I have it the other way around actually, that I used to teach a lot of teenage boys and adults, men and women, and they would share everything. I would hear all about the girlfriends that had broken up with them, and 3 of my old students are now in their 30s and they're still in touch with me, and we still have a friendship, which is really sweet because I've known them for a long time. But actually the little boys who I teach are quite chatty with me. And that's weird for me because it's in German. So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know that I always get it 100%.
I think it's important that any teachers that are listening to this, like I said before, that's your responsibility. First of all, to be a good teacher, you've got to understand the student that you're teaching straight away. And for you to understand that student, then you can get the results that you're after. We have to, everybody's different. Everybody learns different. Everybody wants something different. I'm over this people have got, whatever letters they want to put them in, or they're autistic, or dyslexic. Or I always say to all my students, it's a superpower. It's not a disadvantage. It's an advantage. It makes you who you are. And like I said, in the music industry, most people are going to be some form. Most of my mates are on the spectrum. Of course they are. They have to be who they are. But that does create sometimes that other issue about talking and opening up. And I think that probably girls, I mean, again, Gemma can vouch. I never had a problem with female students talking to me anyway. They would always talk to me. But I think that's really good and powerful now. There's so many good female teachers out there that younger girls can feel comfortable to talking to you. I think it's a huge advantage.
I would also like to say that as a teacher, I found that you were the most approachable of all the teachers that I had over the years. There were a couple of other people, but I was able to really talk to you. And I think it did help the fact that you had daughters, because you were very sort of sympathetic with, what was going on in my life around drums.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of tears, wasn't there?
I used to cry every lesson.
Yeah, I think so.
Every single
I used
lesson.
to take it personally, if I remember rightly. No, but most of my male or female, by the way. I mean, Mark Richardson from Skunk and Antsy came to me for some lessons, and I think he was indoors at some stage, and Julie said, he said to Julie, my wife, he said, "Oh, I'm so scared. I haven't practiced. I'm so scared." And he's like he's built like a brick shit house, and he's like 6'4". She's like, "What? You're scared of mics?" She goes, "Oh my goodness, you wouldn't believe when I get in there." Mind you, by the way, I want to reinforce, I'm not like a character out of Whiplash, by the way. I think he just thought he was disappointing me because maybe he hadn't practiced that week or whatever.
Yeah, no, they were never bad tears. I'll just add that in case people get the wrong impression.
I'm just going to ask one more question before I pass it over to Jem. And it's to do with the industry, really. You host a cool room at the UK Drum Show. So I wanted to know, for those who don't know, what does it stand for? And do you ever feel any pressure to pick certain people or have the room completely packed? I know that's like three questions in one. Sorry, Gemma.
So when you say what does it stand for, what do you mean? What I'm looking for with that room, or what does UK Drum Show stand for?
No, what can people expect when they come into your room?
Okay, so I've been involved in those drum shows for 20 years. They've had various different owners in that time, and I have a very, very simple ethos. I stay with it with everything I've done, and that is it good for the drumming industry or the drumming community? By me being involved in the drum show, is that good for the drum community? Are we getting more people to play the drums, etc., etc.? It's that simple. So whenever I question myself or get asked to do things, I'll sit there and go, right, well, is this good for the drum community? Yes or no? End of. We did the Lad Books commercial together. Kira, you were on that, and although that was a good paying job, I still had that question. It was like, right, 500 drummers on a TV commercial, and it's a betting commercial. So I got a little bit of stick from that because it was a betting. But I'm like, well, hang on a minute. This is, first of all, it's going to keep 500 drummers. Oh, no, sorry, that's a wrong job. 200 drummers in this case, 200 drummers in employment during COVID, backline companies working during COVID, and it's going to be seen on national TV with drummers. It has to be good for the drum community. So that's your first answer to your question. The drum shows now, I always think, is it good for the drum community? And I think at them it is. My room, I've always tried to do something different. I've tried to always, there's the main stage, there's all the other variations, there's the education room. I try to put on artists that maybe don't get the exposure that they normally would. a lot of the artists that I've had 2 years later end up being on the main stage. So I'm trying to go for those kind of artists, or sometimes people want to see a little bit more of a close up. Um, when we moved to Liverpool, we came out of COVID. We needed a bigger venue because of the restrictions with people sitting next to each other. So we went to Liverpool. So we went from my room in Manchester, I think was 200. Now it's 600. The main stage went from something like 600 to 1800. So I think we're never going to fill it. Just because there's so much going on. But like I said, the idea of it was so there was plenty of space for people to sit. Um, I am I worried about filling it? Yeah, for the artist, I'm always concerned because sometimes there's not going to be a lot of people in there. I understand there's a lot going on, but then it goes back to what I've just said. I'm putting on artists that maybe some people don't really know about, and hopefully they come in and go, "Wow, this is amazing." Didn't know this drummer before. So this year, for example, Ed Richardson, he's out now touring with Jules Holland. Ed's been on the scene for like 15 years and he's worked with everybody. You know, he came out of the National Youth Jazz Orchestra. He's an amazing British player and he's constantly working. But of course, he's not known in the drum circuit world. He doesn't have a big social media platform. So I think what I try to do there is I should give him that opportunity to go, look how amazing Ed is. You know, I mean, like I said, if you look at his CV, he's played with, well, just doing the Jules Holland show every week, they play with hundreds and hundreds of artists. And so that's what I'm always after. Vicky O'Neill's playing that room because Vicky's been doing some amazing things with, her sampling and et cetera, et cetera. So I felt great. We need to put that into that room. I think that's answered most of your questions. But when I'm looking for artists, I don't tick boxes. I saw Mindy or I heard Mindy's on here talking about that or you should be pushing drum shows and that to have a percentage of female drummers. I've never ticked boxes. And the reason I don't tick boxes is because where does that box stop? Do I go, I need two old drummers, two young drummers, two black drummers, two white drummers, one Asian drummer, one with pink hair. It's just endless. I mean, I'm being pedantic there, but you see I always go, right, I want the right mix of drummers. I don't care what sex they are, what color they are. I just want the right mix of drummers. I don't want 8 heavy metal drummers or 8 gospel drummers. I'm trying to go, right, here's a really good mix of drummers. I just finished with one of the things that I always love about my room now is that some people just say, I just sit in your room. I just stay there and sometimes I don't know half the artists that are going to be in your room. But at the end of it, I'm going to come out and go, wow, I know these artists. Where the main stage, people could just go onto YouTube or they can go onto Instagram and they can see these drummers performing. And that's not taking anything away from that because overall the show needs a good mix of main stage artists. Mike Johnson's Education Room, they've started the mini stage now, the digital room, obviously my room. Of course, my room's the coolest, and I have the coolest artist. But I do have, if you've been to Liverpool, you've been to my room, I do have the best view because my room is right over the Mersey. So you look out the window if you don't want to look at the drummer, and there's the Mersey. So I do have the coolest room.
You do have the coolest room. I wanted to ask you about Young Drummer of the Year, which you set up, is it now 21 years ago?
23 years ago.
It's 23 years ago.
So I've been running Young Drummer of the Year for 23 years. I'm 61 years old. I'm not going to be running Young Drummer of the Year for another 23 years. I'd love to say I would be, but I'm not going to be. And the Young Drummer of the Year accidentally, if you like, started. And I never expected it to get to the stage it has done now. But it's too important for the industry now. It's created too many of the next 2 generations of drummers that are coming through. That for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been thinking about, what do I do with this? Because I can't do it for 23 years. I run it on my own. I've got a really good team, but I run it. Of course, my kids don't want it. They don't want anything to do with drumming, and I don't want it to disappear. So probably 5 or 6 years ago, I started opening up conversations with various companies about taking young drummer to the next level and the legacy of it carrying on. And I spoke to Tesco's, I spoke to Red Bull, I spoke to various companies, and it really didn't fit. They were interested, but they weren't interested in the drumming community. And the conversation started up with Zildjian. I had a really, really good relationship with Vic Firth back in the day. I got a lot of time for Vic, and of course, Vic Firth, Zildjian owned Vic Firth, so their education program was important. Zildjian have got something like 160 distributors around the world. It's a family-run company. It just was the right fit. Now, John Steffens, who's the CEO of Zildjian, came over to the Young Drum of the Year to the UK, made his own way over. No one knew he was coming. Came to watch it, and I think was just blown away with what he'd seen. He'd heard about it, and then we started the conversation. And the problem is that we couldn't work out how it worked, what we were going to do, where I sat into this, because I said that it's still my baby, and I'm still the face. And Zildjian appreciated that and wanted to do that, but we couldn't work out how would I work full time for Zildjian, which was I didn't want to. I want to carry on doing what I wanted to do, so we couldn't work out how that was going to work. So I'm classed as a consultant, but my job is to run the event that I run. So Young Drum of the Year. But we're launching every year. We're going to launch at least 2 more countries. So US is now running. We're up and running now, and we've got another 3 weeks of entries. So entries are coming in. The final is going to be in Nashville on the 12th of October. We've announced Germany, which we'll send those dates out soon. So my job really is to run it. There's a really good small core team, but I'm also trying to educate the next, whoever it is at Zildjian, the next team, when I'm not doing it anymore, so that hopefully like I said, and again, I sound like a broken record, but if we don't look after the kids, if we don't get these kids playing the drums, none of us have got a future. I found that, sadly, I found the attitude of some of the drum teachers in America different to the drum teachers in the UK. I think people in the UK get it. I'm not saying that you have to enter Young Drum of the Year, because if you don't want to enter it, that's fine. I understand the process. It's not forcing people. But what I don't like is when people go, oh, it's a competition. It's like, yeah, but the music industry is a competition. It shouldn't be seen as a competition. There's room for lots of people. Okay, but the UK normally get it. They're like, well, we could see that drum teachers are going to get more students because their students are either going to have something to work towards to enter this, or new kids are coming out. Where in America, sometimes some of the drum teachers have come up to me last year at PASIC, and I was talking about this to the drum teachers. Some would go, well, what's in it for me? And I was like, what do you mean, what's in it for you? You're a drum teacher. What do you mean? I can't even get my head around. If I've got to convince you, then we don't stand a chance. But coming back to answer your question, so I'm a consultant for Zildjian to run Young Drum of the Year. And like I said, the US is up and running. I'm going to be around. It's funny because I did say to someone Kirsten, who looks after the artists on the north, east, west coast. I have to do my alphabet. I have to do my work out where it is. And I said, how do you reckon I could step away? Maybe do I need to compare the US? And she said, Mike, you can't step away. It's all around. Everything that happens is around you on this drum show, on the Young Drum of the Year. So, but my plan is to obviously, when I can't do it anymore, I'm very aware as well that I'm a 61-year-old man running an event that's for 16 and under. And maybe in the UK, I've got that respect, that they get that, but I'm not stupid to know that I'm going to go to other places. It needs a younger person to be looking after that and be in the front of it. And this means this event can carry on now hopefully for many, many years, creating lots and lots of new drummers under the same format that I set it up in the first place.
As you've had so many years running it, I wondered what you've noticed about the numbers of girls entering the competition. Has it increased? Is it the same as when it began?
Okay. I feel like you know the answer to this because I've opened this conversation. I've always been concerned there's not as many girls entered. Okay. That could be um, something that you did for me many, many years ago when you wrote a piece about females drummers. That could be something with parents. It could be just competitive. It could be, I don't know. I've always been concerned there's not been more female drummers enter Young Drum of the Year. What I have noticed is there is definitely more young girls, 6, 7, 8-year-olds that have been entering, and have been entering it for a few years now, and which is great. I think you might have to check on this one, but I've got a feeling that certainly for the last 2 years, we've had a female drummer in the final top 10. And as I stressed, as I said on something earlier, they're there on merit, no other reason. They're there on merit. They're there because they are the best drummer. They're not there because they're female or anything else. Helena this year, who I thought was brilliant, was such a great drummer. I think I'm sorry to say I've forgotten but I'm sure there was another drummer the year before. But anyway, and I get that. I get girls reach out to me who have got quite high profiles on social media and like, oh, I don't, and I'm like, that's fine. I don't expect you to enter it. You don't have to enter this. The other thing we've got to remember about Young Drum of the Year, male or female, is you're 16 and under. So whatever happens, you've still got 2 years at school. And there's a strong chance it's going to be 4 or 5 years before you actually start a career. So this actually is a really, really good way of making your contacts. You're probably going to be in a final 10, and probably 50 to 60% of those are going to be around you for the rest of your career. They're all out there, whether it's in the West End doing shows, whether it's teaching, or whether it's Matty Brown touring with Stormzy, or Dexter with Ed Sheeran, or Jen Ledger playing with Skillet. Jen came through Young Drum of the Year many years ago. But I'd like more female drummers. But then I've done I did it for this actually. I've done some statistics, and I think that overall there is I think it's about 9% of the drummers out there are female. Okay, so I guess if I look at that and go, well, 9% are female, actually probably statistics working out okay. I'm getting one in the final, or I did in the last couple of years. But yes, I'd love more girls to enter, but I want them to enter because they want to enter. And that also shows that if there's girls entering, it means there's more girls playing the drums.
I'm just so impressed that you've done homework for this. That's amazing. Thank you.
I knew I was going to get a question like that from you two.
All right, Kira, over to you.
Couldn't resist. And that's mental. 9%. Is that it? That's shocking.
But that's much better than when Gemma did. I think it was probably about 15 years ago. Gemma did a piece for me on my website.
Yeah.
And then the statistics were, would have been a lot lower than that. It's so great to see just young kids at the drum show running around, but young girls now running around, so excited playing the drums. And by the way, why shouldn't they be? I think the football has probably, certainly in the UK, I think that football or soccer for the American has helped that as well, because they've seen now, I don't like to use the term, but a sport that is mainly male, now female are playing. And I think that one of the things, Gemma will back this up, one of the things that we found out when she did some research about girls playing the drums wasn't the kids didn't want to play the drums. The kids would go home to the parents and say, I want to play the drums. And normally it was the mum that would talk them out of wanting to play the drums, which is bizarre.
Yeah.
Where now I think that's all changed. I think that, and maybe it is because I've got 2 daughters. Maybe it is that I've brought up my girls and said, you could do whatever you want to do. Or maybe it's just anyone should be able to play the drums. It's that simple.
Yeah. With that, you mentioned your daughters. What is one thing you really hope you've passed on to them in how they are in the world?
Oh, it sounds like I'm a hippie now. Well, one of my daughters, my oldest daughter, gets married in 2 weeks' time. And I know she won't be listening to this, so it's fine, because it's in my speech. They've done it. And I think it's a trait that I think is the trait to everybody. Just work hard and be nice. It's that simple. And they are. just I it's funny when people say, "Oh, I'm just telling the truth," and it's like, well, but why? Why do you need to? If somebody is ugly, why do you need to tell them they're ugly? What goodness is that doing to you? Just be nice to everybody and and work hard, you know. And if you want to do this in the music industry, you've got to work hard, you know, you've got to make sacrifices. But then it's the same in any job. If you want to be successful, you've got to work hard. So just work hard and be nice. And I think that both of them have done that, or both are doing that. I mean, they're both new mums, so you know, one's got a 1 year old and one's got a 2.5 year old. So I guess they are working hard anyway.
So, as a grandparent, do you think that
Oh,
roles for mum and dads have changed over the years?
oh, wow. Mike Dolbear is speechless. Um,
That can't be.
as a parent, do you think their roles changed?
As what you're witnessing now of your girls with their children, do you think that mums and dads' roles have changed over the years?
Well, um, it's difficult, I think, for both my girls are completely different. Holly, like I said, was a trained nurse, and her partner or husband to be is a fireman. So they're quite stressful jobs and they're quite long hours. And so as grandparents, we're pretty hands-on with them, with Harley, which is great. We love it, not a problem. I find it's difficult for maybe if Holly wanted to be a stay at home, or Martin wanted to be a stay at home parent. I don't know if they financially could afford to do it. So I guess that's changed. With Emily, my youngest daughter, she has been at performing arts school since she was 10 years old. She's done lots of films and had quite a lot of success. Unfortunately, COVID came along and put a stop to that. And without getting into the politics, Brexit has finished it off, because now, you know, you can only take on 3 month contracts. And as a dancer and a singer, she couldn't, no one was employing 3 months. But through that, she met her partner, Aaron, who's a professional footballer. And that is a completely different setup now, because as a professional footballer's wife, you don't have any time to do anything else. You only have to watch Victoria Beckham's David Beckham's documentary to see that if his clubs say move, you're moving, or you know, it's pretty full on. So at the moment, my granddaughter is only 1 years old, um, but Emily can't really go back to work because she doesn't know how long she's going to be around that club, or of course babysitters, etc., etc. They are currently based up in Manchester as well, so they live in Manchester. So I think that it's funny that you say that, because I guess looking at Emily and Aaron, they've gone back to probably what my mum was, which was a stay-at-home mum, and my dad would go and work, and that was the way it was. And then you look at Holly and Emily, where they've both got to work, whether they want to or not, they both got to work for financial reasons. So I think that things have changed. But again, I think that, you know, we've got friends where the woman's got a very, very successful job, will work in the city and earn silly amounts of money, but work in very, very long hours, you know, 6 days a week. That suits them. They're fine. And the guy will stay at home. We've got the same where it's just childcare, you know, and whatever works for that situation. I don't think I suppose it's the same as drumming, isn't it? There's no one rule fits all. I think you just have to roll with it. But we do love being grandparents
That's good.
because we give them back.
Yeah. Do you think Emily feels, I know that you're then having to speak on her behalf, but how do you think she feels about that with her career? Because I can imagine that, I mean, that's similar to being a musician, isn't it? When
Yeah.
she's mainly a dancer.
Mm.
Yeah, has she talked about that with you?
Yeah, she struggles. She struggles with that, but she knows that at the moment, look, I've got no sympathy at the moment. They're on holiday. They went on holiday yesterday, and they're on some lovely hotel in Turkey. So, but you know, yeah, it is difficult. She feels that she's spent all those years studying to be a professional actress, dancer, singer, and maybe she's not using that now. But as we say, well, first of all, you wouldn't have met Aaron because she was singing when she met Aaron in the first place. So that wouldn't have happened. So there's fate for you. And who knows, in 10 years' time, a footballer's career is short. In 10 years' time, she's got the skills to go back to doing what she may want to do, and whether that's just teaching. I mean, I think she'd like to do more teaching now, dance teaching, but she just can't because she can't fit, just doesn't work at the moment. But again, you two have got experience of that, having young children. It comes to down to, sometimes it's not about being the female having to stay at home and the male going to work. Sometimes it comes down to actually how much money is someone going to earn so the other person can look after them. It's really that simple. And it isn't about, it's not about the sex. It's about actually, I can earn more money, whether it's, you teaching, you can go, listen, I can earn more money doing this. Great. I'll stay at home and I'll look after the kids. Because I don't know what it's like in Germany, but in the UK, the cost of childminding is terrible. They just don't stand a chance. Luckily, like I said, with Holly, we can be there.
I was going to ask you about your family dynamic. What did it look like? Were you the breadwinner? Can I ask that question? Or was it like a shared thing? How did that work for you?
I think it was pretty shared. Julie was a dancer. We met as a dancer when she was a dancer. Julie studied at top dance schools. She ended up dancing in Paris at the Moulin Rouge. She came back to London and we met at the Talk of London. When she gave up work to have the baby, I mean, she was dancing, if I remember rightly, she was dancing till December, and she had our first in May. So some of the male dancers were like, oh, okay, actually you're a little bit heavy now to lift, you're so just so she was holding her belly in. But anyway, so then she obviously had to stop working because she was carrying the baby. Doesn't seem to, not many people want dancers at that stage. But she went back to teaching. She set up her own dancing school. So for years, she's still teaching dance now, since we moved out of London 9 years ago. But down here, it's not her own school anymore, but she teaches for people. So I think it's probably pretty shared. I think that we've always made things work. I remember sort of situations maybe where she'd be teaching on a Saturday and I might have a gig Saturday night, or I would have a gig Saturday night, and I'd drive around, drop the kids off, and then drive on to the gig and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's probably pretty shared, really. It's not like my parents, which again worked for them, and there's no issues. But my dad would work, and mum would stay at home. We've never really, we've just done what we think is right. We've always had to. There is like any job. As much as I love playing the drums and doing what I do, there's times when you have to do jobs that you're like, oh, I don't really want to do this. And there might be times when I do have to go away for a period of time, or I have had to go away for a period of time. We've had to work that one out. And I'm trying to think if that ever happened with Julie when the kids were younger. I'm sure. I mean, I certainly remember when Emily was in hospital for 2 months. It was me and Holly sort of on our own because Julie was in the hospital with her. I can't remember, to be honest, if there's times when she's gone away on a job and I've had the kids. But I do remember, you're like this. I do remember when so Julie did a lot of modeling, and she got a job when Holly was born, and Julie was still. This is a mama's podcast, so we could talk about it. But Julie was breastfeeding still, and she had a job come in, and she's like, "Oh, but I'm still breastfeeding." It was a service station. The shot was in a service station, and she was going to be like for one of the restaurants, but they were shooting it in a service station. So I drove up to the service station with them and had to look after Holly in a service station for like 10 hours so that Julie could keep stopping breastfeeding and then go back to the job. So it's like, we made it work, it's like, and obviously she said to the contractors, look, okay, I'll do it, but I've got a problem here. And then I do recall that the girls were also, they did several jobs when they were babies with Hot Julie as well. So yeah, we pretty much, I wouldn't say either of us were breadwinners. And we live in this household that whatever goes in the kitty goes in the kitty. It's the end of, because at the end of the day, and again, how people run their households is entirely up to them. But for us, it's just like, well, look, if I've got no money, then I'm going to have to get it off Julie. And if Julie's got no money, she's going to have to get it off me. So it's irrelevant, really.
Congratulations again on your anniversary. 30
Yeah.
years.
By the way, I've never been
Seems to be
asked these
working.
questions in a drumming. This is like very revealing, isn't it?
What do you think?
Well, I've never been asked them, so that's great. Fine. I'm quite happy.
Because I've always wondered, like, I think I'm going off piste here, but what seemed like a mystery to me when I was pregnant, I just thought, well, how am I gonna have a career though and have kids? I don't understand. Like, I'm not gonna be able to go and gig because I've got to look after the babies. And I always just was trying to find the answer.
Yeah.
And I wasn't hearing anyone talk about it. And with drumming dads too, like realizing, oh, that pit drummer's got 3 children, and how do they juggle that and stuff? I'm so curious about all of it.
And I think what you're doing is brilliant, because this is life. Okay, the music industry, what we do for a job, although a lot of people look at us and think how glamorous it is, it's just a job. Okay, this is my friends, I grew up idolizing some of those drummers, and now they're my friends, but they're my friends because I like them, not because. And I think that this stuff needs to be discussed, because this is the real reality of the music industry. I know guys that have lost their wives, drummers, professional drummers that have lost their wives and have got children and have gone through the same scenario that you're going through, where they're going through the heartache of losing their partner, and they've got 2 young children, but they've still got to earn the money. They
Yeah.
might not have had life insurance. And so I think the hardest thing, for the bit that a man will never understand, that a woman will understand more, when they carry a baby, whatever the decision is that they think they're going to do when they've had the baby, I think when you have the baby, that might completely change. You might be going, I don't want to leave this baby. Or you might go, you know what? I want to go. I don't like this part of but I think that we won't understand that carrying the child and that emotional attachment that you have with the baby at the beginning, I think makes it hard, because you may go, right, I'm going to go back out on tour 2 weeks after the baby. And then had this conversation with Hannah, and she said just after the babies were born, certainly the first one, she just didn't want to, that emotional connection. So I don't think you can, where I guess a guy's got no choice, really. I mean, he has no choice. He's like, well, you've got to go out, just because you've got a baby at home, you've got to go to work. You just got to get on with it. So I think what you're talking about is good, because it's life. This is what happens. So keep it going.
Thanks.
Just get better guests than me.
Thank you. No, it's great to speak to you. It's and what you were saying earlier about men and talking, I think also there's a lot of expectation put upon men that they have to provide, and there's this old view that they have to provide for the family, and that's it's not necessarily true anymore. You don't have to do these things. So.
You don't, but do you think that is generic? Do you think that's just something that men, I don't know, maybe it's something scientifically in their bodies that they just assume this problem with men not talking? Do you think it's just something that's always going to be there, or is it going to, I don't know the answer to, as much as I love my parents, and I do, and I had a great upbringing, my dad would just say, just get on with it. Stop whinging. Just get on with it. And I definitely went through a dark stage. When I first come into London, I know now, I look back for about 18 months, and it was tough, it struggled. Now I look at it and go, oh my goodness, I know what that was. And I don't, not having any issue with but my dad would just go, come on, seriously. That's a generation that's come through a war, for goodness sake. This is, you're not feeling too good today. Just get on with it and go to work and do it. So I don't know if it's ever going to, I don't know if it's going to change that much. I think that what we need to stress, though, I think, is that men and women, but as I'm a man, they've got to talk. If you're feeling shitty about yourself, or you've got to have people in a little network. Sometimes it's not, you don't even need to know them. I mean, they always say that the person you're going to talk to the most to is the person sitting on the park bench. But anyway, there you go.
Thank you. We've enjoyed talking to you.
Good. We finished. Thank you. Well done.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for your time and your
homework.
stories and your homework.
Well, it wasn't that much homework, but I thought that I was going to get a question about why there's not more female drummers on the drum shows, or why is there not going to be more female drummers. So I thought I was ready for that statistic. So I actually thought I'd be curious to know how many female drummers roughly there is, because it's hard to find that stuff out anyway.
Were you shocked that we didn't ask either of those questions?
No, no, not at all. But I think
I
it's
didn't
good.
even ask you about breastfeeding. You brought that all up by
I
yourself.
know.
Thanks for listening to the Drummer Mamas podcast. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a 5-star rating because it makes us more visible to other listeners. And we really do appreciate any comments or reviews. It makes a difference. Thanks again, and see you next time.